Hi, welcome back. So this episode we're going to be talking about artificial gravity in science fiction and the science behind it, why it's necessary, and some of the technologies that are possible and not so possible. So the first reason is, why do we care? Why do we generate artificial gravity when we're talking about traveling in space? There's a few reasons. One is a practical one, and another one is a storytelling aspect. So the practical side of things has to do with the fact that we understand that in a low gravity environment, humans don't do great. We evolved on Earth to live in our 1G environment, our gravity that's acceleration of 9.8 meters per second squared. And that's what we're used to. And so when you put our bodies in a 0G environment for extended periods of time, things can change. Some stuff we've known about for a long time, things like your bone density decreases, your muscle mass decreases, and we've tried to compensate for that by having, resistance exercise machines up on the space station, which is awesome. But we've also started to learn some more, because if we want to go to Mars, we're looking at closer to a year, at least trip, probably 3 years, depending on what we decide to do. And we don't totally know what effect that's going to have on our bodies. So there's a practical aspect to why we would want to create artificial gravity when we're talking about actual space travel. So the other side of this is a storytelling aspect, why we need to create artificial gravity, because there's a few things, and one of them is when you try to have a visually 0G environment, that can be very expensive and time intensive to do. So that's not ideal. Another kind of interesting aspect to think about is in video games. So when you're playing video games, you might go to other planets or you might be in space, and typically we always have a 1G environment. This is, when I say 1G, I mean 1 times Earth gravity. And we sustain a 1G environment purely because the physics and the mechanics of having 0G or decreased or increased is going to be frustrating for players. It might be kind of fun at first, but overall it's going to be frustrating. So, storytelling side of why we need to do that. And different shows and different science fiction deals with this in different ways. The first one that comes to mind is using rotational acceleration to generate gravity. And we saw this in 2001 Space Odyssey. It's pretty popular. They have a rotating spaceship, and you can see him jogging along the outside of the spaceship, which is kind of cool. Another one that utilizes this was The Martian. And if you saw that, you saw that they sort of had their space station. They also had a rotating component, which was where their gym was, and they could go and sit and have conversations in a fairly normal gravity environment. And they achieved that through rotational gravity. So what's going on there? Well, it's something called centripetal force. And you can picture it just when you're in the car and you take a hard corner and you feel yourself pulled off to the side. I almost fell over. You feel yourself pulled off to the side. That's because there's a rotational force that's being implemented when you turn. There's F equals ma, force and acceleration. You can have acceleration straight, or you can have rotational acceleration. And so we have rotational forces that come into play, and you can simulate gravity because gravity acts like a force. So you can kind of use it that way, which is pretty cool. You also see this when you have pilots that are training either as astronauts or fighter pilots, where they need to condition themselves for high gravity environments, high Gs. When we say 2, 3, 4G that they're experiencing, that's 3 or 4 times the gravity on Earth. And one of the ways that they do that is not just by going up in the ship and experiencing that, but you can almost do a centrifuge and sit on the side and spin really fast. And when you spin at a certain speed, you can generate specific equivalent of gravity, and you feel that, and your body can get used to it. So we can increase gravitational force through rotation. We also see this actually in Mass Effect. The Presidium and the Citadel uses rotational force in order to generate about 1G of gravity, which is awesome. So we have our rotation way to generate artificial gravity. There's another way to do it, and that's linear acceleration. So again, F equals ma. Like I said, you can have rotational acceleration and force through that, or you could just accelerate in one direction. And when we talk about acceleration, we're saying you are going a speed and you are increasing that speed as you go. So the units for acceleration are typically meters per second squared, or meters per second per second. So you're increasing your meters per second every second. Now, the force of gravity on Earth is 9.8 meters per second squared. And so every second you increase your speed 9.8 meters per second. So I'm starting to get a little crazy saying that over and over again, but you get what I mean. And the Expanse does this. So the way that they have artificial gravity on their ships is that their ships constantly accelerate. They get faster and faster and faster at 9.8 meters per second squared. And then when they're halfway there, they flip over and they decrease at 9.8 meters per second squared. So your ground is going to be on the opposite side. Floor and ceiling are going to flip. But that works. In theory. There's a few problems with that. The first one is that's going to be expensive. So you're going to need fuel to sustain that much acceleration as you go. And that's a lot. And so not only are you going to be spending a lot of fuel, but you imagine you've got to get the fuel onto your ship. And so to sustain this level of acceleration, you're going to require a lot of fuel, which is pretty prohibitive. The other thing is that there is a limit to how fast we can go and how fast our technology is able to go. Two separate things. Technology, we don't have that technology, but the Expanse is sci-fi. It's in the future. We'll say they have the technology, then that's fine. But you are actually going to reach a hard limit because there is a speed with which we cannot go over, which is the speed of light. Which is 3 times 10 to the 8 meters per second. So if you're adding on about 10 meters per second every second, you're eventually going to reach that limit. Now, within our solar system, you're okay. It's like, I think 3 weeks to Pluto. You can do the math and stay within the solar system. It seems a little insane, but that technology is capable for our solar system. Now, the problem is that if you kept accelerating out of our solar system, you will hit the speed of light at about 1 light year, almost exactly 1 light year, actually. It's kind of cool. But once you get to 1 light year, you are going the speed of light and you cannot go any faster, and you're in trouble. And it's about 1 light year away from us, and the nearest star to us is 4 light years. So you can't use this technology if you want to sustain about 1 g of gravity. You can't use that technology to go to a nearest star system. You could, in theory, if you were able to build a ship and had the right amount of fuel and everything to sustain that, you could use that to explore our solar system. But again, it's expensive and rotational energy is just a lot easier to do. So finally, the last way that we come up with artificial gravity is through magic science, usually technobabble. Gravity generators is usually what it comes down to. A lot of this is just because you look at the Enterprise, doesn't look round. So, Scotty, where's the gravity generators coming from? Yeah, sorry. You have Star Wars, Millennium Falcon has a gravity generator. We leave it there. We're good with that. So some technologies are used to sort of explain how to do it using this idea of warping space-time to create artificial gravity. Like I mentioned in my video on ESO in Mass Effect, they use ESO warping space-time to generate artificial gravity, which works. Star Trek tries to have the schematics for gravity generators. Star Wars just says it's a gravity generator, and we leave it at that. But the idea of rotational artificial gravity and linear acceleration for artificial gravity, those work. We're okay with that, and we see it in a lot of science fiction. So keep an eye out if you have any other fandoms you can think of that you'd like me to address, maybe what type. There's so much out there. Like I said, some address more than others, but shoot me a message. I'd love to hear what you think. And anyway, I hope this was thought-provoking. Thanks for watching. I'll catch you next time.